Thank you for coming here this morning. Before we start, I'd like to ask all members of the media to just let everybody know who you are and who you represent before we get started.
My name is Sarah Logan. I represent the Royal Gazette and the Drive for Change Road Safety campaign.
Dennis Martin, News.
Scott Lynch at TNM, sir.
Alice Gray-Walton, I'm an intern for the Royal Gazette and Drive for Change.
Thank you. Well, thank you everybody for being here, and good morning. Thank you for joining us for this roundtable discussion regarding the recently passed Roadside Sobriety Checkpoints Bill. I am pleased to also be joined by the Director for Transport Control, Ms. Jasmine Smith. I want to take this opportunity to thank you all for the chance that you're having and have decided to come here to answer your questions about roadside sobriety legislation and what it means for the Bermuda public. So we decided we'd have this opportunity to give the media, now that the bill is passed, a chance to ask any questions that you have about the legislation, which is now on its way to Government House for assent. As you know, yesterday the Attorney General, the Honorable Kathy Simmons, who speaks for Transport and Regulatory Affairs in the Senate, carried the bill through, and it is now going to Government House for the Governor's assent. The Roadside Sobriety Checkpoints Bill introduces legislation that aims essentially to save lives and to curb drunk driving and create safer roads for all of Bermuda's motorists. This legislation will allow for the issuance of breath and impairment test equipment at predetermined checkpoints to assess whether motorists are over the alcohol limit. I am motivated and pleased by the movement of this legislation as we take further steps to ensure that Bermuda's roads are safer for everyone. Of course, now I'm happy to take any questions from the media as you wish. Don't know what order you wish to go. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. Sarah Logan from the Royal Gazette. Okay. I was just looking at the guide sheet for the penalties for failing a breath test or refusing to cooperate with checkpoints, and it says that's a minimum fine of $1,500 or 12-month imprisonment, or both on the first offence. There's no mention there of an automatic driving ban. Is that still the case as it is now? If you fail a breathalyzer, currently you receive a 12-month minimum ban from the roads.
Yeah, that is in the legislation. It might not be there, but it is in there.
It remains the same.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Minister Chairman to TNM, it's been made to my understanding that it's possible, just like drug court, you're going to have a court specifically for these type of matters, drunk driving type legislation is coming down the pipeline. Is that possible?
Well, we're here to talk about roadside sobriety checkpoints legislation. Any changes to the court matter will be a matter for the Attorney General as a part of creating courts and that. So I cannot speak to that at this time. That's a matter you can raise with the Attorney General, Kathy Simmons.
Bermudians and their patterns of behavior, is this really going to put a dent in road deaths?
Well, we wouldn't have done it if we didn't believe it would work or contribute, along with a number of measures we are taking. As you know, we have a road safety plan campaign going on. There are a number of different things we are doing to do that. This is just one of them. And so there's been a call from a number of interests in this country for years for roadside sobriety checkpoints. In other countries, it has contributed to improving the situation. So we in Bermuda have finally got to the point where we're going to deploy it so that we can improve our situation.
Following on from Trevor's question, you said you'd like to reduce the occurrence of drunk driving offences by 25% as part of the 5-year plan, is that correct?
Yes.
I would just like to know what your success metric is going to be. Do you know how many DUIs there are now? And do you have a target of what number you would like that to be?
25% reduction from what has been the current situation for the past year.
Yeah.
And all of our, as you know from the announcement we've made, injuries, accidents, and deaths over 5 years, it is our desire to reduce all of them
By
25%.
What is the current number of DUIs? Do we have, so we can find a success metric?
I would have to get you that information, or perhaps
We're in the
the
process
director
of
can give
compiling.
an answer to that.
What we have done is looked at all of the cases that have gone through the courts, and we're compiling the information now. So
Right.
once we have it completed, we'll compare that with other government departments to come up with a number that's true as a measurement tool.
Right, and you'll be able to share that that figure with us,
okay.
with the media?
Probably will be public information to
Yeah.
publish it.
We've got next 2 weeks, 2 days. When is this going to begin?
We're working with the Bermuda Police Service to deploy. Ultimately, we've done our job as legislators to deploy the required legislation. As has been announced already, there's a process of which you would have to follow to even set up a checkpoint, which requires a 5 to 15 day announcement, permission from the senior magistrate. And so we've completed our part in reference to legislatively. There is a piece as well for the actual breathalyzer equipment to be available, and also for the training that the police require for that. So the deployment part of it is their responsibility, and we're supporting them with that. But we've done the part where the legislative framework exists, subject to the governor's assent. From that point on, they will be able to deploy these checkpoints, subject to the procedure that legally must be followed.
So we don't have the physical equipment on the island yet? The actual breathalyzers yet? Are they here?
We have chosen the equipment, but there's also a legal process with ensuring that is can legally be used. So, but that's a matter for the police to clear with us.
Mm-hmm.
That piece is the police's responsibility. It's not transports. So once they're satisfied with their training and that they can effectively deploy it, they will consult with us. We will ensure that the equipment is legal, and then they can move forward. So I would suggest you might consult with the police as to their readiness to deploy and when that's going to be starting.
Sure. I have another question. Trevor just mentioned cut match there. And I see it says checkpoints can be requested when there is reasonable suspicion that incidents involving consumption of alcohol may take place. For example, cut match Heroes Weekend. I mean, we all know Bermuda. Every weekend there's reasonable suspicion for alcohol when people are on Front Street drinking. And the summer months, June, July, August, are the highest for incidents, crashes, and also fatalities historically. Are you limiting it to big events, or can we have these every Friday, Saturday night?
Well, that provision, I would say, is for a particular circumstance. Let's just say you have a event, not necessarily included alcohol is being served there, but people then get together, go to a local club and a sort of festive environment begins. So the authorities become aware of that, so they decide, well, because this is going on as a result of something that's happened, let's just say a foreign team wins some sort of championship. People gather at somewhere to celebrate, and we know that drinking will be going on at a higher level than what is normal. Then there is the provision to possibly deploy a checkpoint in the vicinity without having that notice requirement. But they still must inform the senior magistrate. That can be done by a person who is superintendent and above in the police. If they become aware, they would then quickly inform the magistrate via email, and the magistrate then can give his approval based on the information that the superintendent provides to them about the situation, and then they can go forward with the checkpoint.
Okay, so just to be clear, it's these special events where it's going to be more alcohol. The only difference is you don't have to have notice for those big events. But if there's no big event, it's just a Friday, Saturday night, you just have to go through them. You can still have a checkpoint, you just have to give notice.
Yes. But that provision that you initially requested is for circumstances that pop up where that 5 to 15 or 10-day period you haven't had an application. If something happens out of the blue, of which the police become aware, then they have that process to respond to it, obviously in the public interest.
When do you foresee this actually happening? 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks? When do you see this? Because you just explained that there's a process that we have to go through, equipment, training.
Yeah.
When 3 months max? Possibly before Labor Day?
We're hoping as soon as possible. Again, the deployment is a matter for the Bermuda Police Service, because they are the ones
in communication with police, so with the.
We hope that within a matter of weeks they will be ready to deploy this system. But again, it's their training process. It's them getting familiar with the equipment and so on, and the people who will be operating on their behalf being ready to do that. Right? We as legislators have done our part, created the legislative legal framework. The deployment and operation is a matter for the police service.
Is there a limit on the number of checkpoints per day? Is there a specific kind of cutoff for the amount of checkpoints you can have on a given day?
Not really. It'll be indicated in the notice the parish and
the date and
the date where the checkpoint will be. There may be 2 or 3 checkpoints in that area.
But it's just one parish?
Yes, it'll be identified. They'll be in Pageant on that date. So there may be 2, like depending on what the police decide, to be in that parish for that day.
There could be several checkpoints within the parish?
It could be, but that'll be a matter for the deployment, and the police have their discretion on that.
Okay.
I have a question about the process. It says that all vehicles at any given checkpoint will be checked.
Mm-hmm.
Every single vehicle, okay.
Everybody goes through the checkpoint.
But not everybody has to be checked.
No.
Okay.
So, can I just describe that?
Okay.
A checkpoint will be set up. Everybody will know. So if you go down that road, you know that you're going to be going through a checkpoint. So it might be that the officers who are trained, because understand, they have the power to do checkpoints right now, but not with the deployment of the sobriety equipment and technology and procedure in the manner upon which we are putting in law around this operation with the preliminary breath test equipment and process. So they can do it now. They can have a checkpoint right now, set it up right now in about 5 minutes down on North Shore or Middle Road or anywhere, and as many as they like. Understand that. So what will happen is that for these types of checkpoints, cars will come along, and the police who are already trained in the preliminary, in the testing, which is what they do now, they'll go up to you and say how you're doing and how you look, your breath, and all the process they use now will be used to determine. And if they find that you're fine, then you'll go along. You might have 5 seconds they'll have in front of you. Your car might stop for 5 seconds. Thank you. Go along. How are you doing? They'll go through the process they go through now. Go along. But every car in that road will go through the breath test. I mean the checkpoint.
Profile.
Right. Everybody. If I in GP2 come up to it, I've got to go through. Just if you want to crystallize it that clearly, I will have to go through. I'm not going to be sent around to go around and pass them, but like bypass. I will have to go through the checkpoint.
And everyone that goes through checkpoint will be stopped, even just for a few seconds?
Yes, to go through that particular process, which is what they do now.
Yeah, and at that point that they get stopped, do they have to go through step A, the preliminary test, the physical tests, before you get to point B?
No, if you see what it says, if impairment is suspected, the following test will be administered.
Yeah, you don't have to go through A before you get to B. You can go straight
Preliminary
into the
impairment test. So they could deploy either one of those tests if you're suspected of being under the influence. So if you're not, you get sent along your way. And those who are going to be at these checkpoints, the authorities are trained. They're trained now. So, and they will be trained to deal with this, also with using the preliminary breath test equipment as well.
This test only is specific for alcohol.
It is a sobriety checkpoint.
Can I ask the question again?
Sobriety, point alcohol.
Just alcohol.
Alcohol for the time being, with using a breathalyzer equipment.
Because we do know that there's also substance that
Yes.
users can use that can bypass that alcohol, but still be in a state of mind that is
Yeah.
kind of dangerous.
Yes. But
Just alcohol at the moment.
alcohol.
If the officer suspects anything other than that, what happens from there?
That is a matter that you must deal with those who are trained to do that. But this is a sobriety checkpoint to deal with alcohol usage. Right? Now, I will just say, and it's not a matter for this particular measure, but the other forms of
Minor
substance
yes.
abuses that can be measured through a possible use of checkpoints will be dealt with further down the road. But that is not the subject of this measure now. This is the start for us. It's new to Bermuda. It needs to ensure that we do it properly. It needs to do that it can be deployed effectively. And then we can look at the other issues around substance abuse that we may experience. But this is our start.
Bermuda is a small island. A lot of people know each other. And, these officers at the checkpoint might find themselves in awkward situations. They might pull their mother over or their wife. Are there any provisions for that sort of scenario?
Again, you're asking questions that you should be asking the Bermuda Police Service. But they will be trained. They are using a test and a procedure that they already deployed to do these things. They may find those situations they are now. But they'll be trained. They will be trained for all these situations, and it will be their job to operate these checkpoints effectively. And also, the use of body cams also is to be included in the checkpoint process. So these situations will be filmed for possible use as evidence later, if need be. So that's another perhaps line of accountability that will be there for the authorities who will be operating the checkpoints.
You see there's warning signs. That's something new that I haven't seen before.
Yep.
You're going to have like mobile so you can move them around.
Signs that will let people know checkpoints coming up,
Yeah.
so they can be prepared.
And then the other thing, we'll be just wrapping up, awareness. Obviously you're doing this today. Are there any other plans to make the public aware that this is going to happen so they're not taken by surprise?
Absolutely. Part of this and some of the time lag between now and deployment is benefiting the process as of today. And as you know, we've been talking about doing this, is that we're going to have a robust campaign of educating the public as to what to expect now that the checkpoints are legal. This is what you're going to expect. So we have a very robust campaign planned for public education, so that people will know exactly what to expect when they get to a checkpoint, so that once they're deployed by the police, they will know what to expect as they drive up to one. There'll be no mystery, at least for those who hopefully will be paying attention to the campaign, and we'll do every effort to assert it so that every driver, every rider will know what to expect.
Sort of increasing fines for DUI offenders, because some places around the world are very hard on drink driving and DUI. Nothing worse than losing your loved one to a drunken driver. And we've had maybe one or two in the past that, and I know for a specific fact that one individual possibly killed two persons driving on our roads. Is there any legislation, any thought of coming down very hard on repeat offenders for DUI?
Well, you see the types of fines that we're deploying with this. So if a person either is found impaired or refuses now, they do have a hefty fine ahead of them if they refuse to take the test. It used to be that there was a difference where a person could, if they refuse to take the test, many lawyers were advising clients to not take the test because there was a lower penalty. Now, everything is equal. So there's no legal benefit to not taking the test or taking it.
I mean, the bottom line, refusing is just like having a dirty, no urine is a dirty urine. Just using the term.
Yeah, I understand that. But other increases in fine.
Take a breath sample is just as guilty as if you were, and to find that you were.
Well, the law, as we will change it, will make sure that is equal. So whether you take it or you don't, you are subject to the same possible fine in the courts.
That doesn't currently occur.
No, it doesn't,
at the
but
moment, because often you'll see a refusal might get a 12-month ban and an $800 fine, but a failure of a breath test will get 18 months and a $1,200 fine. That is going to be
eliminated.
Is eliminated. And now the length of time of the ban, is that going to be 18 or 12?
Do you remember if it was 18 or 12?
Yeah, we actually have that here.
I think it's
we'll
12.
Provide that to you.
Yeah, it's actually on page 6 of the legislation.
Of the legislation.
Of the
So it's
of the
12.
penalties. I believe it's 12.
So the ban has actually been reduced
So
for failure of breath tests from 18 months to 12 months.
Well, it's graduated. First offense, 12 months. Second offense, 18 months. Third offense, subsequent offense, $5,000, 2 years. So it's a graduated system.
It has been reduced then, because I think the second offence used to go up to 3 years, didn't it?
It wasn't reduced. We are actually including that if you do not take the test, it's the same. So whilst the magistrate may not have been enforcing it,
That's right.
it's in legislation.
Right. I think that's what you actually were witnessing is the magistrates using discretion on the fines and the penalties, not that it wasn't in law. So I think you should perhaps go back and take a further look at that. That's what our research has shown.
I just know he was dishing out 18 months.
Well, I think you need to go and look at what actually has been done compared to the law. I think that's where I think the magistrates have been using some discretion and not deploying the full penalty that is available in law in some of these cases.
Sure. I've got one more question, if that's okay. It sort of relates to this issue, not exactly the legislation, but when you introduce legislation like this, people need to adapt, you know. And one of the big things that have come up from our readers, at least, is the reason people are drink driving is because there are no other means to get home, reliable means. That the buses cut off at 11 o'clock, sometimes 7 o'clock for certain areas. The taxis aren't always reliable, especially at 2, 3 in the morning. And people are struggling to get home. Yes, there's a designated driver option, but is that the only option? Or when we spoke, you said that you would be willing to explore a public-private partnership to perhaps put on some buses at the weekends and after hours. Have you made any progression with that?
We're still in discussion. Of course, you know, CARTA has had a program, and we're open to working with others, and we're going to continue to explore that. That'll be a part of what we build up around this, because once the sobriety checkpoints are deployed, we realize that people perhaps need options that they can exercise to get home. You know, there are some private security firms that have their own little schemes to assist certain people who may find themselves in that situation. So we support those, and we'll look for other options that we can deploy as this system becomes firmly established as a part of our road traffic regime.
Just to verify, in the literature, I see the word preliminary test. Does that mean that if you fail the roadside test, that you go on to the station and do the secondary test?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. And the station is on a much more rigid legal framework. So whatever test you take there can be submitted as evidence in court. That is why that is done that way, and that was to deal with some issues that we're concerned about as a matter of law and like the Constitution, that we wanted to make sure. So a person who may fail the test at the roadside, preliminary impairment and preliminary breath, still will be transferred to a PACE certified space at Hamilton Police Station to take the substantive secondary test there to fully ensure that, as a matter of evidence, they were determined to be under the influence.
And if they pass that secondary test?
Well, that's a matter for the law. I can't answer that at this point, but that's how the regime will operate. It will certainly ensure that a person's rights are respected in this, and doesn't just, from a preliminary standpoint, they're not totally found to be guilty. So, and of course, the process for handling them at the secondary test is a lot more structured and rigid, and is subject to certain legal sort of strictness.
So the results from the roadside sobriety test admissible as evidence in the case?
I think only after the full process has been completed it could be done that way. It's not going to be on the face of it taken and that, because if somebody is found to be impaired at the roadside, they are automatically transferred to the secondary. So the secondary is always a part of a situation where somebody fails.
Two-part process.
Yes.
That's straight across the board.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Someone who fails at the roadside is always then transferred to the secondary situation at the Hamilton Police Station, because that is the test that will be considered to be the most primary evidentiary test.
That gives you the exact amount.
Yes.
At the station. Then
Yes. Yeah, and it's actually a fail-safe for even for the person who's subject to the test, because it will be indisputable if they fail the secondary test.
But it is disputable if they fail the first one only.
I think there may be legal room for that, so that's why we're doing this. It's a protection for both sides of the law, I think, for the rights of the person as well as what the officials are seeking to deal with. And understand, these are preventative measures. These are not meant to as punitive. We're trying to stop people from harming themselves and harming others. So it's preventative. It is our hope that people, when they know that if on their way home, there's a likelihood of them passing a roadside sobriety, they will either curve back their own consumption or make alternative ways to get home if they desire to continue to do whatever they're doing. So it is a preventative measure. It's not meant to catch people out. That's why people are going to know that it's there.
But they're not going to know exactly where it's there, so they can't.
They will know that if they go through a certain parish, that might be where they have to go home. Everybody knows how to get home. Mm-hmm. If they got to go through Middle Road, Paget, or Middle Road, Devonshire, and they know that, oh, I heard there's a checkpoint there, that, well, if I can't go any other way to get home, I need to make some changes in what I'm going to be doing.
But you're not going to go down to that specific information of Middle Road, you're just going to say Paget.
It'll be Paget, yeah.
But
if they know that they got to go through Paget to get home, they either avoid going to Paget or they change their behavior.
They could go South Road or they could go Middle Road.
Well, we don't know that. I think you're creating scenarios that we cannot predict. Remember, this hasn't been deployed yet. Let's not try and script it before it even happens. Let's wait to see how this works. It is about a preventative effort to stop people from doing what we don't want to do.
Can be set up at a time?
No, I've already answered that.
So you can have three. You can have a South Road, a Harbor Road, and a Middle Road.
If they're in Paget at the same time.
Oh, okay. Cheers.
Or if they're in that locale that has been indicated by the preliminary notice. If it's in that, it could be on any road in that parish. If that parish has more than one road.
Trying to dismiss that scenario that was just painted. It can be all three.
Yeah, but that'll be a matter for deployment.
Good stuff.
They might decide to have it on one road and not have it on the others if there are multiple roads going that way, but that's a matter for those who do deployment.
And they can have it in multiple parishes on the same
No.
line?
I've already answered that question, Madam. And if you read the legislation, it can be in one location and time. We don't say it's going to be on an exact road. If it's going to be in a parish, we identify the parish, and at the time it's going to be. That's it. So I've already said it will not be multiple parishes on one application.
Is there any get out if there's two major events, one in Southampton and one in St George's?
That'll be a matter for the police to decide how they deal with that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming, everybody.